Right, you can see the screen, Mataji?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu,
Hare
yes.
Krishna. All right, you can carry on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Atha Dvadashodhyaya. Arjuna Uvacha. Evam Satatayuktaye Bhaktastvam Payupasate Ye Chapyaksharam Avyaktam Tesham Te Yoga Vittama.
Arjuna inquired, which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested?
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Mayaveshya Mano Yema Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Parayopetaste Me Yukta Mamata.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect.
Text 3 and 4. Ye tvamiksharam mani desham yaktam payupasate sarvatram chintam sarvatra gamachintam cha kuthastam chaladru achalam dhruvam sanyamendriya gramam sarvatra samabhutaya te prapruvanti mameva sarvabhutahite rata.
But those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons, engaged in the welfare of all, at last achieve me.
Keshodhariktaste ma matyakta saktachetasa avyakta hirgatir dukham deha bhadhiravapyate.
For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied.
Text 6 and 7. Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matpara ananyeva yogena ma dhyayayanta upasate teshamaham samudratta mrityu sansara sagarat bhavami na chirat partha maya veshita chetasam.
But those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service, and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death.
Text 8. Mayeva manam adya sattvam mayi bhutam niveshaya nirvishasya madhyeva ata urdhvam na sanshaya.
Just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always, without a doubt.
Text 9. Atha chittam samadhatum na shakoshi maya sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mami chaptum dhananjaya.
My dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me.
Text 10. अभ्यासेमप्य समर्थोऽसि मत्कर्म परमो भव मध्यर्थमपि कर्माणि कुर्व सन्धि समवाप्यसि.
If you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage.
Text 11. अथेतदप्यतोऽस्मि कर्तुमद्योगमाश्रित सर्वकर्मफलत्यागं ततः कुरु यतात्मवान्.
If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, then try to act giving up all results of your work and try to be self-situated.
Text 12. श्रेयो हि ज्ञानाभ्यासा ज्ञानां ध्यानां विशिष्यते ध्यानात् कर्मफलत्याग्या शान्ति निरन्तरम्.
If you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation, and better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind.
Text 13 and 14. अद्वेष्टा सर्वभूतानां मैत्र करुण एव च निर्ममो निरहङ्कार समदुःख सुख क्षमी सन्तुष्ट सततं योगी यतात्मा दृढनिश्चय मय्यर्पितर्मनो बुद्ध्यो मद्भक्त स मे प्रिय.
One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and his intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me.
Text 15. यस्मानो द्विजते लोको लोकानो द्विजते च य हर्षमर्ष भयोद्वेगैर्मुक्तो य स च मे प्रिय.
He for whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equiposed in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me.
अनपेक्षां शुचिर्दक्ष उदासीनो गतव्यथ सर्वारंभ परित्यागी यो मद्भक्त स मे प्रिय.
My devotee, who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me.
Text 70. येनो रिष्यति न देष्टि न शोचति न काक्षति शुभाशुभ परित्यागी भक्तमान्य स मे प्रिय.
One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things. Such a devotee is very dear to me.
समशस्त्रो च मित्रे च तथा मानपमानयो शीतोष्ण सुख दुखेषु समसंग विवर्जित तुल्य निन्दास्तुतिर्मौनी सन्तुष्टो येन केनचित् अनिकेत स्थिरमर्ति भक्तिर्मान्ये प्रिये नर मान्मे प्रिय नर.
One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equiposed in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me.
Text 20. ये तु धर्मामृतमिदं यथोक्तं पयुपासते श्रद्धा नाम परमा भक्तास्ते अति मे प्रिय.
Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuta Mataji and Leela Vilasini Mataji. Stop sharing. Oh, Krishna. Zoom has gone into a bit of a... Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. All right. Somehow or the other, there's a problem with my Zoom. It's frozen. It doesn't want to allow me to share my slides. Devotees, I've got to exit and come back again because my Zoom's frozen. To 12 of Bhagavad Gita today, devotional service. So welcome to everyone. Everyone got the times right today. Move the clock forward.
Yes, Prabhuji.
I was just wondering if anyone has got to be. I think it must have been an hour. Not to worry. So today we'll do text number 5 of chapter number 12. But we'll say the invocation first. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Malitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastichadi Shatarine. So text number 5. Klesho dikata rastesham avyatasakta chetasam avyakta hi gati dukham deha vadbheravya avyapyate. For those whose mind are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's quite a lengthy purport. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnani Yogis, and persons who are in full Krishna consciousness, engaged in devotional service to the Lord, are called Bhakti Yogis. Now here the difference between the Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitively expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, is very troublesome, whereas the path of Bhakti Yoga, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is easier and is natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind which can thus be applied. Of course, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his form within the temple is not idol worship. There is evidence in the Vedic literature that worship may be saguna or nirguna, of the Supreme possessing or not possessing attributes. Worship of the deity in the temple is saguna worship, for the Lord is represented by material qualities. But the form of the Lord, although represented by material qualities such as stone, wood, or oil, paint, is not actually material. That is the absolute nature of the Supreme Lord. A crude example may be given here. We may find some mailboxes on the street, and if we post our letters in those boxes, they will naturally go to their destination without difficulty. But any old box or an imitation, which we may find somewhere, but which is not authorized by the post office, will not do the work. Similarly, God as an authorized representation in a deity form, which is called Acha Vigraha. This Acha Vigraha is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. God will accept service through that form. The Lord is omnipotent, all-powerful. Therefore, his incarnation is Acha Vigraha. He can accept the services of the devotee just to make it convenient for the man in conditioned life. So, for a devotee, there is no difficulty in approaching the Supreme immediately and directly. But for those who are following the impersonal way to spiritual realization, the path is difficult. They have to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme Lord through Vedic literatures as the Upanishad. And they have to learn the language, understand the non-perceptual feelings, and realize all these processes. This is not very easy for a common man. A person in Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service, simply by the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, simply by offering regulative obeisances of the deity, simply by hearing the glories of the Lord, and simply by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, realizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead very easily. There is no doubt that the impersonalists are unnecessarily taking a troublesome path with the risk of not realizing the absolute truth at the ultimate end. But the personalist, without any risk, trouble, or difficulty, approaches the Supreme Personality directly. A similar passage appears in Srimad Bhagavatam. It is stated there that if one ultimately has to surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the surrendering process is called bhakti, but instead takes the trouble to understand what is Brahman and what is not Brahman and spends his whole life in that way, the result is simply troublesome. Therefore, it is advised that one should not take up this troublesome path of self-realization because there is uncertainty in the ultimate result. A living entity is eternally an individual soul. And if he wants to merge into the spiritual whole, he must accomplish the realization of the eternal and knowledgeable aspects of his original nature. But the blissful portion is not realized. By the grace of some devotee, such a transcendentalist, highly learned in the process of Jnana Yoga, may come to the point of Bhakti Yoga or devotional service. At that time, long practice in impersonalism also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. Therefore, an embodied soul is always in difficulty with the unmanifest, both at the time of practice and at the time of realization. Every living soul is partially independent, and one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. One should not take up this process. For every individual living entity, the process of Krishna consciousness, which entails full engagement in devotional service, is the best way. If one wants to ignore the devotional service, there is the danger of turning to atheism. Thus, the process of centering attention on the unmanifested, the inconceivable, which is beyond the approach of the senses, as already expressed in this verse, should never be encouraged at any time, especially in this age. This is not advised by Lord Krishna. So, back to the verse. So this chapter is called devotional service. And it's called devotional service because in the beginning, Arjuna wants Krishna to tell him which is a better path. Being engaged in the personal aspect of the Supreme, which means devotional service, or meditating on the impersonal feature. Krishna's verses or answers to that question is very emphatic. That of the two paths, the path of focusing on the personal aspect of the Lord, engaging in devotional service, is the far superior path. And in this verse here, Krishna is clarifying why it's far superior. Firstly, Krishna is saying that those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So Krishna is saying some very important, giving some very important reasons. And Srila Prabhupada expands on those in the purport. One initial very important point that Srila Prabhupada makes is that the individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. It is very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he is not the body. Just like sometimes there's a nut that's screwed into some metal. And if it is there for a very long time, and there is some rust, and there is some merging of the two, to open that nut is very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. So in the same way, the spirit soul, which has been in this material world for a very long time, for that soul to conceive of itself to be different from the temporary material body, it's very difficult. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 27th chapter, text 17, Devahuti, the mother of Lord Kapila Dev, who is an incarnation of the Lord, she asks a very wonderful question to Lord Kapila Dev. Devahutir uvacha, purusham prakritim brahman, na vimonchati kar ichet, anyo yapas rayatavcha nityatvad anayo prabho. Devahuti inquired, my dear Brahmana, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other eternally, how is that separation possible? Srila Prabhupada gives a very beautiful purport. I'm just quoting part of the purport. Prabhupada says here, Devahuti, the mother of Kapila Dev, here makes a first inquiry. Although one may understand that the spirit soul and matter are different, this means theoretical understanding, the actual separation is not possible either by philosophical speculation or by proper understanding. Prabhupada says not possible by philosophical speculation or by proper understanding, means by the process of jnana, yoga. The spirit soul is the marginal potency of the Supreme Lord, and matter is the external potency of the Lord. The two eternal potencies have somehow or the other been combined. And since it's so difficult to separate one from the other, how is it possible for the spirit soul to become liberated? So this verse and purport is giving insight into, although the jnanis may claim through the path of jnana, they can realize the soul as being separate from the body. In actuality, it is very difficult because this external potency of the Lord, being in contact with the marginal potency, it's very difficult to separate. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very difficult to overcome this material nature. Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. And this is emphasized further on in that same chapter, where the root cause or the root reason why it's so difficult is also given. We've just described one reason, but there's also another deeper root reason why it is so difficult. And in text 27, Lord Kapila Dev explains a very fundamental point. He says, even if the great fear of bondage is avoided by mental speculation and inquiry into the fundamental principles, it may still appear again, since its cause has not ceased. So Lord Kapila Dev is saying something very, very important in connection with this process of Jnana Yoga. He says this fear of bondage, maybe by some effort we are able to break this conception of bondage. But that principle of bondage or fear, it will appear again and again and again. Why? Because the root cause has not been addressed. And what is the root cause? This purport by Srila Prabhupada I'm going to read now is very important because it gives the fundamental reason why this process of meditation on the impersonal is so difficult. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, two kinds of propensities arise in the living entity. One propensity is icha, which means desire to lord it over material nature, or to be as great as the Supreme Lord. So very important. The first principle is the nature within the conditioned soul to lord it over material nature and to become as great as the Supreme Lord. That's the first principle, and it's called icha. Now there's a second principle. Everyone desires to be the greatest personality in this material world. Dvesha. Dvesha means envy. When one becomes envious of Krishna or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one thinks, why should Krishna be the all in all? I am as good as Krishna. These two items, desire to be the Lord and envy of the Lord, are the beginning cause of material bondage. As long as a philosopher, salvationist, or voidist, as some desire to be supreme, to be everything, or to deny the existence of God, the cause remains, and there is no question of his liberation. This, dear devotees, is the fundamental root cause why the path of impersonal liberation, the path that's devoid of bhakti, is always doomed to be difficult and doomed to be failure. Because the root cause, the living entity is in this material world, is because of icha and dvesha, envy and the desire to lord it over material nature. And that is only given up by the process of full surrender, recognizing that we can never become one with God. We are always eternally separate. Jivera Swarup Hoy, Krishnera Nitya Das. In the purport, Prabhupada gives some reasons why this path is very troublesome, some further reasons. We've just spoken now about the root cause, and Prabhupada gives some other reasons. So the two paths that are described are the path of bhakti and the path of jnana. So the path of jnana, one has to understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme through Vedic literatures as the Upanishads. To be frank with you devotees, I don't know how one can ever understand the unmanifested representation of the Supreme. So what does unmanifested representation of the Supreme mean? It means impersonal Brahman. And how can you just understand impersonal Brahman just by reading Upanishads? That's the first reason. The second reason, they have to learn the language, Srila Prabhupada says. Jnana means study of Vedic literature. Through analysis, sometimes called the path of neti neti, not this, not that. One has to read the Vedic literature, and the Vedic literatures are written in the Sanskrit language. And Vedic Sanskrit is very complicated Sanskrit. It takes one about minimum 10 years to learn the Sanskrit. And even if by study one is able to learn the grammar and all of the technicalities of Sanskrit, there is one further difficulty. Every Sanskrit word can have multiple meanings. One Sanskrit word in the Vedic literature can have multiple meanings. So how will one know what is the right meaning? Very difficult. One can take another meaning. Then Prabhupada says one has to understand the non-perceptual feelings. And Prabhupada phrases it so nice. Non-perceptual feelings, in the material world, everything's about perspect, having feelings. So in the unmanifested state, what types of feelings are there? Are there feelings? If one merges into one just big impersonal energy, there is no activity. When there's no activity, are there feelings? And it is deemed that the mind is also gone. So very difficult. And realize all these processes. So the jnanic process is very troublesome. They have their own processes of how one moves from the material to the non-material. And I've not studied it, but just by understanding it, it is difficult. In the Purva Prabhupada also talks about nirguna and sarguna. Sarguna means full of qualities, and nirguna means without qualities. So in the Vedic literatures, there are many texts, and Prabhupada gives reference there to the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the philosophical division of the Vedic literatures. And the Upanishads are quite difficult to really understand. Up on the screen, they have put up some mantras from the Sri Ishupanishad. And there, the distinction, to understand the distinction between Saguna and Nirguna is not very easy. So mantra 4 says, although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place he controls those who supply the air and rain, he supplies all in excellence. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he's also very near as well. He is within everything, and yet he is outside of everything. Such a person must factually know the greatest of all, the personality of Godhead, who is unembodied, omniscient, beyond reproach, without veins, pure and uncontaminated, the self-sufficient philosopher who has been fulfilling everyone's desire since time immemorial. So these verses, unless one is a devotee of the Lord, they are very difficult to understand. He walks and he does not walk. He is far away, but he's very near. He's within everything, but he's outside of everything. How does one understand these mantras in the Vedic literature? From the bhakti process, we understand that Krishna is far away, apparently, because he lives in his abode. He doesn't really remain in contact with the material world. But he's near also because he sits as the super soul within everyone's heart. He walks, but he does not walk also. He does not walk in the sense how the ordinary living entity walks. As you said, he could walk with his hands, he can walk with his eyes. Every sense is interchangeable. And he's within everything, and yet he's outside of everything. Because of his energies, he's within and he's outside. That we described and discuss in detail. I won't go into that. We discuss that in chapter 10. And this verse here is without veins, pure and uncontaminated. So those people think that unembodied means he doesn't have any form. He doesn't have veins and he's pure and uncontaminated. We have veins. So if he doesn't have veins, means he doesn't have form. Again, this is mistaken. Krishna is unembodied in that he doesn't have a material form, but he has a spiritual form, Satchidananda. He does not have veins because his body is not made out of matter, bone, muscle, protein, urine, fat. His body is spiritual. So this is not easy to understand, and unless one is trained through the process of bhakti yoga, one cannot understand. Prabhupada says at that time, long practice in impersonals also becomes a source of trouble because he cannot give up the idea. This is another reason why it's so difficult and troublesome. When one is very practiced in impersonalism, for them to come to the realizing the form of the Lord is very difficult because they cannot give up this idea. Give up this idea of impersonalism. They have concluded we have a form now. Form means suffering. So to come out of suffering, it means not to have a form. So they cannot reconcile how one can still have form and not be suffering, because they are only able to equate form and suffering together. They can't separate those two. They cannot understand that they can be spiritual form. They have no idea and conception. So for them, it's very, very difficult to give up this idea. And Prabhupada said one should know for certain that this unmanifested realization is against the nature of his spiritual blissful self. The soul is person. The soul has feelings. The soul has desires. The soul is full of activity. The soul is full of bliss. And Prabhupada explains in the impersonal realization, there is Sat and there is Chit, but Ananda is not there. It is relative to Bhakti, the Ananda that comes from Bhakti, it is insignificant. And Prabhupada says if one wants to ignore this devotional service, there is a danger of turning into atheism. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is one beautiful verse written by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Tara Madhye Moksha Vancha Kaitava Pradhana Yahaita Krishna Bhakti Haya Antardana. The foremost process of cheating is to desire to achieve liberation by merging into the Supreme. For this causes the permanent disappearance of loving service to Krishna. This is a very strong statement. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is writing here that this process to achieve liberation by merging into the Supreme, it is the foremost process of cheating. Why? Because it cheats the living entity of its real nature. And it causes the permanent disappearance of loving service to Krishna. If one becomes too steeped in this concept, to enter into loving devotional service to Krishna is very, very difficult, unless one gets some special mercy. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, the desire to merge into the impersonal Brahman is the subtlest type of atheism. As soon as such atheism disguised in the dress of liberation is encouraged, one becomes completely unable to traverse the path of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavatam, it says that to completely satisfy the self, one has to take to devotional service, uninterrupted and unmotivated devotional service. Anything that falls short of pure devotional service will be unable to satisfy the spiritual soul. And this form of impersonal liberation is nothing but atheism disguised. This is what Chaitanya Charitamrita says. Also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said there are all kinds of activities, both auspicious and inauspicious, that are detrimental to the discharge of transcendental loving service to Lord Sri Krishna, are actions of the darkness of ignorance. And the purport Prabhupada gives in terms of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda is so beautiful. The poetical comparison of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda to the sun and the moon is very significant. The living entities are spiritual sparks, and their constitutional position is to render devotional service to the Supreme Lord in full Krishna consciousness. So-called pious activities and other ritualistic performances, pious or impious, as well as the desire to escape from material existence, are all considered to be coverings of the spiritual sparks. Anything except devotional service covers the real nature of the living entity. The living entities must get free from these superfluous coverings and fully engage in Krishna consciousness. The purpose of the appearance of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda is to dispel the darkness of the soul. Before their appearance, all these superfluous activities of the living entities were covering Krishna consciousness. But after the appearance of these two brothers, people's hearts have become cleansed, and they again become situated in the real position of Krishna consciousness. Before the appearance of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, this devotional service was covered. It was covered by all sorts of ritualistic activities, all sorts of impious and pious activities, all sorts of false conceptions about the nature of the soul. And devotional service was covered up. And thus there was no happiness in the material world. But Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they've come and they've removed this covering. Just like sometimes Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they compared to the appearance of millions of suns or millions of moons. If there was such a thing as the appearance of millions, there'll be no darkness. It'll dispel every bit of darkness. So in the same way, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they've come and they've removed all coverings of devotional service. And Prabhupada says in the purport, this process of Krishna consciousness, it's so simple. Eat, chant, dance. In the early days, Srila Prabhupada cooked and distributed the Sunday love feast, and he kept a jar of syrupy gulab jamans on hand for any of his spiritual children if they felt peckish. The sweets became known as ISKCON bullets, tasty weapons against Maya. Once Srila Prabhupada popped one gulab jamun in his mouth and he exclaimed, "We are eating our way back to Godhead." Simply by taking Krishna Prasadam, we eat our way. The monkey and the kitten way. Impersonal realization is like the monkey way, very difficult, on endeavors, can at any time fall, precarious. Bhakti yoga is like the kitten way, safe, sound, protected by the mother. So I'll stop here, dear devotees. It's 8:32. We'll take any questions, comments, or reflections you may have. Hare Krishna. Oh, maybe no one was here. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I thought I lost all of you.
Hare
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. There's some questions. Anyone has or comments or reflections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Chandrika
You
Mataji.
mentioned that Krishna is far and but he's near, which
Yes.
is the super soul. But my understanding is it that if a devotee obviously is meditating on him, then he's close to him. But otherwise, if you covered with Maya, then he's far away.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's true. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You cannot perceive the super soul. You cannot perceive the Lord in the heart. And obviously Krishna is in every atom also. So in Maya you can't perceive that, but when one is realized you can perceive that. So that's true. Yes.
And you mentioned about walking. Can you just I can't remember what can you just repeat? Is that possible?
Yeah, it says he walks, but he does not walk. Krishna, in his potencies, one of our ways, or the only ways we can move, is by moving our feet and walking. So Krishna is what it means, moving. So Krishna can move without the need for walking. That's one understanding. The other understanding is that Krishna, as all of his senses are interchangeable. Normally walking is only related to the legs, moving by legs. But Krishna, his senses are interchangeable. And simply by desiring, he can move. He can move. So he doesn't necessarily walk, he can fly. So that is one understanding we can have, why he walks and he doesn't walk. It's in the context of the living entity who can only walk with his legs or move with his legs.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Just wanted to understand this. Does it, I mean, Krishna is not impersonal, but what about demigods and their abodes? Are they impersonal?
No, they are personal.
No,
They're personal.
they are
They're
not.
persons.
They are personal
They're persons, and their planets are also.
because they have separate planets, though they have their own
Yeah.
abodes, isn't it? Okay.
Yes, but it's temporary. In that sense, it doesn't have an eternal position. It's temporary. So sometimes anything in the material world is not considered to have permanent existence. Therefore, they're considered to be like a dream. They are real.
Okay.
They are real, but they are also, in the sense, because they're temporary, they are considered to have no permanent existence. They're not real.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But they are not impersonal, that's for sure.
No.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
I want to just ask you one question. And what I feel is we have the personal form. And is it better if, you explained us that it is better to worship the personal form. And as we have the personal form, it is easier for us to worship the personal form? Then
Yes. Because we are persons, we are spiritual persons. We are
yes.
covered now, but we are spiritual persons.
Right, yes.
And because persons means activities, relationships, exchanges.
Yes.
That is natural for the soul.
Correct.
So for the soul to be merged into an impersonal Brahman, is not natural. As Prabhupada says, once one person asked Prabhupada, why is it said that if one merges into the impersonal Brahman, one will eventually fall down again? And Prabhupada gave a very simple answer. He said, because we get lonely. We get lonely.
And our mind also wonders, that is it, when we pray the impersonal form. That's what my idea is. I don't know how far I'm true.
Mataji,
right.
I could never figure this out. Maybe one of y'all could tell me how, if y'all had experience.
No, I'm not at all.
Yeah.
I just started the classes. I'm enjoying so much. but I read somewhere that what are the manifested form and unmanifested, but I always thought that manifested form is better type of worship
Yes,
rather than unmanifested form.
you are right.
And as we have the form, we can relate with that personal form of Godhead.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
That is what Krishna is saying
Yes.
in this verse, and that's what Srila Prabhupada is clarifying.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Mataji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
I just want to share a realization. I was a bit lost with this today's Vijay Dashani Dusharastra, I think. Yeah. So I asked around this morning.
It's a Vijay Dashmi.
Yeah.
Vijay Dashmi is Dashera.
Vishera, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I asked around this morning, and my BV leader, Sankirtan Prabhu, would kindly explain a beautiful explanation. And he said that it represents, it's a Sanskrit word which means removal of 10 bad qualities within us, which is connected with Ravana, and he's got these 10 heads. Can somebody shout out what those 10 qualities are? The bad qualities? I'm sure these are all learned devotees in the group, so I wondered if they can, call out the different ones, the 10 bad qualities.
Anyone likes to say? I can't remember off the top of my head. Any of you can remember?
I can remember some, Prabhuji. I can share some.
Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh.
Yes, share.
Yeah, it's the lust.
Yeah, lust, greed, anger.
Lust.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Mada, which is pride.
Yeah.
Lobha, which is greed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Krodha, which is anger. Kama Vasana, which is lust.
Yes.
Moha, which is attachment.
Right.
Matsara, jealousy.
Right. Envy.
Anyaya, which is injustice. Ahankara, which is ego. Varta, which is selfishness. And Amanavta, which is cruelty. So all these qualities are hidden in us that Ravana carries. And to actually develop truth and goodness in us, we need to kill the Ravan hidden inside of us by conquering these 10 qualities.
Very true. Very true.
So I thought that was really, really a good message.
Yes, wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us on this auspicious day.
Yes, it is an auspicious day.
Ram Vijay Dashami.
Vijay Dashmi, yes. Also, Jolly is selfishness as well.
Yes, I did say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Swartha. Is swartha, selfishness, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Negativity.
Thank you. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Nitai Mata Mataji.
Yeah, very nice class. Prabhu, I was thinking when you said can walk and cannot walk, I was thinking of Shakshi Gopal. And this is the reason, it's like Lord said, you go front, I would come back behind. I don't know, this came to my thought. It's like when the devotee needs, he walks, but if you go and see, it looks like he doesn't walk.
I think he carries us. That's what he means. Because in the sand, you don't see his footsteps. So he says, I'm carrying you, isn't it? That's what it is.
Yeah. So Nitai Mataji, yes, that's a nice example you've given. So that story of Shakshi Gopal, where the Brahmin, a young Brahmana went to Shakshi Gopal, he was the witness. And he was telling the Shakshi Gopal, you have to come and bear witness because you are the witness to this promise made by the elderly Brahmin. And the deity said, well, I'm just a deity. How do you expect me to walk? And then the young Brahmin said, well, if you can talk to me, surely you can walk also. Yeah, so that's a nice example. All right. Any other comments, reflections?
And
Otherwise-
Prabhu, I was also reading the same chapter, and I've done a little for of her. It says, I was really this evening thinking, when we say we never say I body, I leg. It's like we always say it's mine, and also you say my son's, my bank account. So if it was very good for myself. And if you think like that, it's that's not my body. It's not my body. It's like we never say we always say my body. We don't say I body. And like just like my bank account, it's not necessary all the time. It's the same, and it can reduce and it can go away. My son is also not mine, like away from me. So in that way, it is easy for us to understand that we are not the body, we are a spirit soul. And I just thought I would.
Yeah, that is a nice, simple way of understanding how we're not the body. Wonderful.
That would share since only this evening I read it, so that's why.
Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Vrindavan.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for a lovely class. These the demigods, do they come down as devotees as well? Like Kumbh Mela, you've got these yogis who just are doing personal Brahman, and they just meditate on their own, and as groups of things, and they've got these special powers to move from one place to another and things like that. So are these demigods that have come as devotees?
You might be one.
What you mean, on this planet?
Yes. So you've got those yogis in Kumbh Mela who's on their own.
Yes.
And they're meditating in personal Brahmas, and they're just on their own, and they're just in the forest, whatever, wherever they are.
Yeah.
Are there demigods that have come as devotees, as yogis?
Not generally, no. Not generally. Those are sadhakas, living entities. And generally, a number of them have come back again and again as yogis for many lifetimes. Generally, the demigods don't come to practice yoga in this planet, no. Although some of them are praying to come and join the Sankirtan movement.
They are.
You must have read the stories recently where Srila Prabhupada was in a kirtan in London, and he's telling the devotees, did you not see? Narad Muni was here. Yeah, and there was other times he said that Lord Shiva has also come. So they come to engage in the Sankirtan movement, but not generally as yogis. No, they don't come as yogis.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right. I think it's 8:46 now, Sunday. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. We'll see you all again tomorrow. And we'd like to encourage all of the devotees to please, if you have not come forward to be part of this wonderful effort to spread Krishna consciousness, in this effort, we're looking for 108 families, 108 devotees to try to get 10 families to help spread the mission of Bhagavad Gita in these difficult times. If you have not become part of that yet, please drop us a message, and we can share with you how you can become a part of this effort to spread the message of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhakti ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.